they stole my money in income taxes to pay for all this crap that they're not supposed to be doing, that is not constitutionally authorized in Article 1, Section 8 for probably 80% of the crap they spend money on. They're lying about what they're spending money on. So if they save the money, return the money to the taxpayer from which they took it.
I would say all of our children have Social Security numbers, and I think the level of fraud that they're finding in Social Security means not only was the taxpayer robbed, but future benefits that were promised to my children were robbed by fraudulent payments out of the Social Security system. It's all theft.
Renegade Online.
The legacy media scene for the Trump administration or for Trump's approval ratings. But I am curious to come back to what are you seeing? What is, because you said it was in the 50s, but we didn't get specificity for where he is necessarily. What are you seeing right now? And is there continued support for the actions that he's taking, i.e. tariffs, for example, for the deportation attempts, maybe for the cabinet picks? What do we have on that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, opinions haven't changed at all at any on any component of his platform. We just pulled deportations again. It was 62%. People love his programs of massive deportation, and everything about the Trump administration has always been more popular than him. But he's still above 50. I think the last reading was 51. I think he's probably going to kick around between 51 and 53 and just stay there, because he was 53 after the election. He was like 50, 51 before the election. And he was actually even 50% after January 6th, way back in 2021. So I think at this point, if people have taken the red pill, they're not going to take it. It's just not going to happen.
When is the last time we've seen a president sustain in that region for approval rating? How long has it been?
No, it just doesn't happen. I mean, Biden got above 50%. I think the highest he ever got was 55%. And I think that was an artifact of May of 21, when a lot of the blue states were rolling back their mask mandates. So I don't think it was really related to him. He only stayed above 50 for a few weeks at most at the beginning of his term. And he was actually, I think if you average all of the approval across his term, he was about 5 points less than the average of Trump 1. Trump 1 got up to 59, but he went down below 50 relatively rapidly too. But of course, it was all based on this predicate of this Russian collusion hoax that was fake and actually funded by U.S. aides. And then you're back into the Obama administration. Obama, he got up to, I think he was as high as 60. I don't know. It was above 60 at one point.
That was first year, right?
That was in his first term.
Came crashing down as well. And so going back, I mean, it got really high during Bush. It got almost up to, I think it was above 80% after 9/11.
Right after 9/11. Yeah, I remember that.
Office. So the weird thing is that Bush got really high, but he also got really low. He left office with 33% in our numbers. And so I don't think you're ever going to see Trump get above 60 unless a miracle happens. But I don't think you're going to see him low either, because no matter how bad Biden sucked, his numbers were really, in our polling, was really resilient. He had a floor at about 38%, and most of the time he was just sticking around in the mid 40s. But the country's happy. The biggest headline is that right now, right direction. So every night, along with job approval, we ask people, is the country headed in the right direction or is it on the wrong track? Mm-hmm. Is 48% right now, which is the highest number we've ever recorded in our polling history, which goes back to not long into Obama's first term. So the country's actually 10 points more right direction than it was a few months after political Jesus got elected. Obama, 10 points higher. So that's where we're at right now. People are really happy. And then they're starting to get mad. These are numbers, I think these are unreleased yet. What I think we're seeing is this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year where the trends of this political realignment just come crashing down, where major opinions shift. I think we're going to not go back to Republican and Democrat in the same sense we've been before. And it's going to play out really slowly as all this stuff gets leaked out. I mean, most people aren't paying attention to Stacey Abrams. We could see an indictment soon. I don't know. There could be crazy stuff happens. So we're going to follow this bit by bit as it rolls out, one question at a time. And this is our first opening salvo. How likely is it that some employees of the federal government have engaged in fraud to enrich themselves with taxpayer money?
Tell me it's 100. Tell me it's 100, Mark.
Is this something that you can? Is this something you can show on the screen?
Bro. Yeah, I'll get it up. Give me a sec.
Yeah, just you want to share it backstage.
Well, I'm hoping you confused them. They're like, oh yeah, Trump's definitely in on that.
Yeah, since you mentioned USAID, we'll get to this in a bit. This is breaking news. Trump to slash 1,600 USAID positions just before midnight tonight.
Yeah, let me blow this up. 47% very likely. And you joked, Pro, it's not going to be 100 because there's Democrats in here. But 23% somewhat likely. So it's 70%, 7 in 10 U.S. likely voters. Only 25% say not likely. Only 7% say not at all likely.
Mark,
So
I'm
that's
good with that. More people believe in UFOs and abductions by little green men than believe that the government was not involved in fraud.
Yeah. And, 33% of Democrats say very likely. I guess that's way less than Republicans and independents, but it's still a lot of them, right? Like 59% of Democrats say likely. No, of course, we're not like saying how likely is the Democrats are stealing. That's the trend here. Republicans, this 60% very likely, 18% someone like, that's a really big number. Mm-hmm. We're like getting up to 8 and 10. They know that includes Republicans. I mean, it's the kleptocracy. And I think the pendulum is going to swing back, because how would you describe your current feelings about the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in federal government spending? 45% very angry, 25% somewhat angry. Again, there's that 70% number to only 25% who are not angry. So we're going to track this. And then we're going to ask more questions like, how likely is it that the intel agencies were used against you? Should the money be clawed back? What should happen to these people? Should they, how many of them should be indicted? This is going to be the story. This is what we're going to be following, because things have to change. There needs to be accountability. And if the public opinion's not there for it, it's like there's only so much that Trump's going to be able to do. But right now, it looks like it's going to be.
Mark, if you're not yet asking about the dividend, I would love polling on how many people, because this is something that might have an interesting response from Republicans. How many people are in favor of this dividend that Trump and Elon are proposing, which doesn't seem to have much support in Congress, but the idea that you get back some percentage, 20% of the savings they find goes to the American people in the form of like a $5,000 lump sum to each taxpayer. Well, I would love to know what people think about it.
Keyword taxpayer. Yeah, not as a handout to people who aren't paying the taxes. And that's the key, because, ultimately, if people, it's a handout. No, they're returning my money to me. They stole my money in income taxes to pay for all this crap that they're not supposed to be doing, that is not constitutionally authorized in Article 1, Section 8 for probably 80% of the crap they spend money on. Yeah. They're lying about what they're spending money on. So if they save the money, return the money to the taxpayer from which they took it, is my point.
I would say not even that. I would say all of our children have Social Security numbers. And I think the level of fraud that they're finding in Social Security means not only was the taxpayer robbed, but potentially future benefits that were promised to my children were robbed by fraudulent payments out of the Social Security system. Yeah. It's all theft. It's all theft. And we're going to find out how big it is. Now, I had a really interesting conversation down at CPAC. And it was with a former CIA field agent who had worked for the agency for a very long time. And I said, what are we going to see here? How's this going to play out? And we were talking about the dividend. And of course, I haven't had a chance to poll on it yet. It's a very, recent topic. But he said, well, this has intent behind it. There was a plan. They stormed OPM the day of inauguration. And he says, you know what? I think they have everything. I don't think that a lot of the stuff we're seeing is just being discovered. He says it has the hallmark of like controlled information release. And obviously Trump trolls a lot. He'll go out and say, we're going to buy Greenland, but you don't go promise people $5,000. That's not a troll. That's something that people would actually get like really mad at if you said, oh, no, sorry, we can't. And also, if you think about it, it's a pretty good way to keep Republicans potentially going along with him. Right? If Republicans break ranks on this one and they're like, no, we can't afford $5,000.
I think it's genius, Mark, because the people who are on the other side, who they want, consider the welfare class for a minute, right? And we're not denigrating, but consider the people who typically vote on the Democrat side because they want government handouts. If you tell them, let me shrink the government and I'll send you $5,000 checks every time I do this, then all of a sudden you've converted them. They're like, smaller government, baby. Shrink it.
And that's a big part of this, is that everything that Trump is doing now, that people elected him to do, and that's what, by all accounts, is exactly what he's doing. This has to sustain beyond the next 4 years. This cannot leave office with Trump. Whoever comes and takes over, the movement that's being built right now culturally here in the United States, the same kind of movement that we see being demanded elsewhere around the world. We're seeing that push to the right because it's so far to the left in places like Canada, in places like a multitude of Western European countries. Like we talked about earlier, this election that just took place in Germany, the left-wing party there lost their ass today. Lost their ass. And that is because people have gotten fed up. But the movement can't be tied just to Trump. MAGA can't be just Trump. Because 4 years from now, 5 years from now, when there's somebody else there, the movement can't be tied to the man. It's got to be tied to the American public if we're going to see actual long-lasting, sustainable, material, measurable change. Because not everything's going to get fixed by next month. Not everything's going to get fixed next year.
I would raise the temperature, what you're saying, by like 10 notches. Because I think what we're witnessing, is the end of the fourth turning. I think Trump has kicked something off so existential for our country that it has to be finished. Because if Democrats get back in power, with the current mental state of the Democrats and the current level of threat that this is, there will be no quarter. They will do everything. They'll pack the Supreme Court. They'll throw people in jail. They'll literally do everything. And so we have a very limited time before the risk is high that it gets reverted. And what we're talking about is at the end of 2 to 4 years, we have to be in a position where the government is accountable. And that's not just like, you can't fire 10% of the government and think it's going to change. There has to be a complete cultural overhaul of all of our systems of governance, such that accountability and like integrity are key to this.
And then Mark, we've got to save the rest of the Western world, because our brothers and sisters in the UK who are starving for freedom, right? It's been taken away from them. Like, the U.S. has to be the beacon once more, or else let's just all get ready for quasi-Chinas all over the world. And that's no world that I want to live in.
Well, if you look at Twitter, I think these are very, very, very powerful optics. If you look at Twitter, Elon came in and he did his Elon method. And people could say, well, my company's different. That was just a fluke. Things are way too complicated here. That's just blah, blah, blah. But if he comes in and does it to the United States federal government with the apparent ease that he's doing now, it's like, no, it's all corrupt and fraudulent, and we're just going to fix it. And if you resist, screw you, you're out on the street. Then it's going to be like, people are going to take notice. They're going to say, oh, maybe, very strong leadership. And then if you look at Javier Milei, right, you say, oh, well, he came in and he did something, but it's a fluke. It's Argentina. It's a little different. Trump comes in and does that to America. Like, what we're talking about is we might not have deficit in a year or two. Like, what? Nobody thought that was possible. Everybody, Republican and Democrat, would say, no, it's too complicated. Oh, the policies just never going to work. I think other countries.
How about this, Mark? Just something as simple as, for the first time in perhaps ever, at least in the last 100 years, or let's put it this way, the first time since we've had an income tax infect this country like a cancer, which was about 105, 110 years ago now. The first time ever, we may actually have a budget that truly shrinks. Like, instead of just, baseline budgeting where, well, the government's going to get bigger. It's just a question is, will we grow the budget by 4% or 15% next year? Right? No. Let's actually have a year where 2025's budget's already set. Let's see come back and the 2026 budget gets passed and it's actually smaller than 25. That's never happened.
Yeah. We're dealing with a lot of money here because right out of the CIA guy's mouth, the debt hawks are not going to allow nothing to get paid back. Right? If Elon uncovers some money, we're going to pay some debt down. We're going to cut some spending. And I think the idea of this dividend is shrewd because it'll be a fiscal stimulus. This will go back into the economy. But they're not going to dump it all into the American's pocket. They're going to keep some of it, right? If you run the math, and I don't know what the program, I don't know if it's per household and if it applies to taxpayers or not, but you pretty quickly get up to $1 trillion, right?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe $1.5 trillion. And if that's just a portion of what's uncovered, and it's going to be, and this isn't like, oh, it's been 10 trillion over the last 20 years. It's like, no, we probably have trillions of dollars of fake payments in Social Security, Medicare. Like, we haven't even started to talk about Medicare and Medicaid billing practices.
No.
20% of our GDP is the health industry. How much of that is government grift? We're going to uncover all
Technically
this.
80% of it, because Medicare is responsible for, at last I looked, nearly 80% of all the healthcare spending is effectively a single payer system, because 80% of the healthcare consumption is for people 65 and older, as you would tend to expect, because people who are older tend to consume more healthcare. That's how life works. So, I mean, that's look, anytime you have a single payer system, whether it's in the health insurance side of things or Medicare in this case, or just as we've done with college education, I've talked about this countless times, it's been moved to effectively a single payer system where the federal government's in control of basically all college funding because they run the student loan program now. Everybody taps into. Very, very, very few students actually will go out and pay for their education, usually with the help of their parents, obviously, in cash. It's extremely rare.
Well, then you have government subsidization of home loan credit risk too.
I know we got to move fast, but let me ask one last question to Mark. Mark, in the midst of all of this, how are Democrats faring on their approval rating? Do you have that data?
Yeah, actually, it's not what you'd think. It's not what you think. Democrats are actually kind of chill right now. They have a 25, 30%, depending on the day, Trump approval rating. Their heart's not in it. The strong Trump disapproval is only 60%. This is the guy that they've done everything to try and come after them. They slander him and try and throw him in jail. You try and impeach him twice. 60% Democrat strong approval or disapproval thereabouts.
And what about approval? So I don't know if you track this, and I could be wrong. Do you have any information regarding like just the Democrat Party in general, what the public approval is of the party? As we're watching this surge and this, so the ideals of Trump, the ideas are higher than Trump himself. I'm just curious if you know what the American people right now, what they're thinking about les resistance.
Yeah, I have that. Let me pull it up. They definitely took a hit because what I have now is, look at this.
You share and we'll share, Mark. You share, we'll share.
This is like a good vibe check of where Republicans are at, and then I'll try and pull up the other thing too, because we definitely just did Democrats. I think we had a really small portion of people. Yeah, okay, check this out. This is a Republican vibe check, and then I'll get the Democrat vibe check up. 22nd Amendment to the Constitution limits the president to 2 terms of office. Would you approve or disapprove of repealing the 22nd Amendment to let presidents serve for more than 2 terms? And 35% approve, 52% of Republicans. So half of Republicans approve repealing the 22nd Amendment so Donald Trump can run again. What is this? 71% of Republicans say that it's likely he would win a 3rd term.
It does not surprise me one bit. And I'm sorry, I've been having my mount for this light over here has been falling apart ever since I took it with me when I went to Orlando a few weeks ago. And it's the first time I've moved it in years. And now it just will not stay mounted. It keeps falling over, and it just fell over in the middle of the show, which is why all of a sudden I went dark. I had to go
I saw Mark's image of Trump from the mugshot. Guys, I'm just going to tell you, I don't know if we've ever brought it up on the show. The fact that he has that hanging outside the Oval Office and every person who enters the Oval Office. I mean, the fact that Schumer has to walk by the mugshot and know who he's dealing with. I love it. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. It's a whole lot of fun.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.